Hard. Here I sit, broken-hearted, hoist by my own petard. Something, something, something. Good day. Happy Friday. I'm going to clean my glasses, which has become one of my idiosyncrasies, I notice, when I don't know about you, but I have sort of things that I do when when I'm having trouble sitting still, or when I'm feeling awkward, or I'm what I can distinguish is basically there's a moment and it's difficult for me to just sit in the moment on some level, some flavor of difficulty. And it often doesn't occur to me as difficulty. Our resistance to the moment rarely occurs like we're being resistant. It just occurs like, oh, there's something I need to do. And I've noticed that one of the things I tend to do is clean my glasses since becoming a glasses wearer. There we go. In part, I can defend this action because I can say, well, I don't like dirty glasses. I like to see the world clearly. And I want the world to see my eyeballs clearly, free from the gunk on my glasses. But by the same token, I also notice that there's a patterning, like a default, like a go-to for this. As soon as I just notice, even if my glasses aren't necessarily dirty or whatever, there's an automaticity with which I grab for the cloth to clean them and I start cleaning them. And it just gives me a thing to do. And so some of the other varieties I have of this are like drinking liquids. He says drinking liquidly. I can trace this one way, way, way back when in the early days, the pre-internet days, if you can believe that. There was a time before the internet. This is a spooky story I'm sharing. And myself and the people that were kids and some adults around the age that I grew up in, we had these bulletin boards where you'd call in with your phone line and then you'd chat. And then we'd have these meets where you'd get together in your city with the other people that were on this bulletin board. And I was very nervous around this because it meant meeting people. And at the time I had a story that people didn't like me. And so I was awkward and uncomfortable. And what I did was I would just, as long as I was drinking water, I didn't have to talk. I didn't have to speak. It kind of gave what that drinking water created internally for me was permission to just sit quietly. Same with, actually, now that I'm distinguishing this, same with cleaning my glasses. It's sort of like, if I'm doing a thing like that, then I can sit quietly. And sitting quietly for me is less so these days, but it can be edgy because in sitting quiet, it creates stillness. And in the stillness, what we can become, and certainly what I can become more present to, is like maybe the lack of connection in the space, or the awkwardness, or the whatever happens to be in the space. And so these are sort of these, we'll call them strategies, these habits that I learned to form because they create a bit of reprieve from the starkness of just being with what's in the space. So this is one of the things that being really busy, like those of you that are really productive, being busy, it allows us to not have to be with something underneath the surface. As long as we're busy, we're focused on a task. And this is why people that suffer with anxiety, fear, rumination, it's why it's so, those things are actually really good fuel for productivity. They give you a great reason. And Grimby's going to ask me to get him out of this. You can wait a minute, Grimby. The productivity, they give us a great kind of medicine that society really rewards us for to take, so we don't have to sit with whatever there is there for us to feel. And then, of course, you go to bed at night and there's nothing to do and you're sitting there quietly and all of that stuff comes to the surface. And further, because we don't have any ways, we don't learn any approaches or strategies to be with this stuff, we become more and more anxious when it shows up. Our muscle to sit with something atrophies, and then it's harder for us to sit with that thing because of that atrophying, and then the cycle repeats, and then blah, 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 blah. Let me just let Grimby out of this office. I should have done this first. Be one moment. Letting the dog out of the office. Okay, Grimby, out you go. Yeah, there you go. There you go. And then we put this on there. Okay, now we're cooking. By moving away from the microphone, I gained a viewer. Strategy, new move. Just 2 hours of me, like with my butt facing the camera. Oh, Adam. I don't know. I guess that's like a admiring female viewer voice that I was doing there. Okay. So I've cleaned my glasses. I've distinguished that like a pro. I'm checking to make sure that all these streams are healthy. View this on YouTube too. Now on YouTube. Great. I'm in all these places. Neat. I'm gonna mute that. Live show spicy edition. Yes. Facebook. Yes. Cool. Excellent. We've got all this sorted. We're doing good. Hey Jason, nice to see you, man. Pre-internet. Yeah, Jason, who just has written a comment here on Fatcha book. Jason and I met, I think we actually met through the internet, right, Jay? I don't think we connected in the pre-internet era, but a lot of Jason and I hang out a lot. We're really good friends, and a lot of our core group of friends came together through these sort of bulletin board systems, these pre-internet systems. That's how we met. I miss those days, he says, waxing, whatever that word is. I can't remember the term. What is it when you, nostalgically, waxing nostalgically. Anyhow, got a whole bunch of topics here, spicy topics to just come down hard on. So, I'm going to talk Charlie Kirk. I'm going to talk Ozempic. I'm going to talk spirituality versus dogma, all of that and more. The way we're going to set this up first is it feels like it's been a while since I've distinguished these stages of leadership, and it feels like this would be a good context in which to hold everything else we're going to talk about. So very quickly, I'm going to talk about the 3 stages. This is my distinction on the stages of ontological leadership that I see people go through. You'll notice that none of this has anything to do with like what great leaders must do. Like there's a post sometimes I like to troll LinkedIn and see like, what are people writing about leadership? And one of these posts said, I'm going to do this in leadership post voice. Great leaders protect their team from, and then there's a bunch of stuff listed: lack of trust, micromanagement, toxic culture, gossip, blah, blah, blah. These stages of ontological leadership, which is to say these stages of being that we move in and out of and sort of stand in as a leader, have nothing to do with the doing. They're not about protecting or eating first or eating last or giving feedback and receiving feedback. That is all secondary to who you're being as a leader. And that's what these stages are about. So at the first stage of leadership, this is where a lot of people begin. We're largely, what we're doing is censoring ourselves. We are keeping ourselves on some level kind of small so that we don't upset the world around us. So this is kind of like, I don't want to rock the boat. I go along to get along. I'm very agreeable. People find me very nice. I do what people require of me, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of self-censorship, and the focus is largely on other people. What do other people require from me in order for them to be happy, satisfied, et cetera, et cetera? And this ontological position, this way of being, this place that you can find yourself. Hold on, I'm going to see if I can get a little wider view. Let's get this camera wider on me. Pow, nice. Look at that, 78 degrees. Watch this, 90-degree action. That's too much. Don't want to see that much. Now you can see Magic the Gathering cards behind me. I don't want you to see my wizard skills. Bam, 78. You can see just a few Magic the Gathering cards behind me. That's a little teaser for those of you that are on audio only. If you get on the video, you get to see the Magic cards right there. Okay, so at this first stage of leadership, this can exist across the board regardless of what you're doing. This isn't exclusively about your position in a hierarchy or in your organization or your company. This exists wherever you show up in life. I was talking to someone the other day who was talking about launching a coaching practice, and I was asking them, what do you want to make in terms of your money? And their conversation was largely about what was reasonable and what they felt that they could get away with, or that's not how they worded it. They said, what is reasonable? What will people accept? I don't want to offend people with my prices, because once I talked to this person and they offended me I was offended by what they were charging. Sorry, I have a nose hair that's tickling me. That's why you see me scratching my nose so much right now. Should have trimmed, but I knew it. Should have trimmed. And So this person wanted to figure out like what will the market allow, what is acceptable, blah 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 blah. And this is a first stage conversation. What can I charge that is reasonable to other people? What can I charge that the market will bear? What can I charge that won't offend other people? So we are, how we show up in the world is a function of what other people think, feel, accept, don't accept, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're projecting our internal stories out there onto other people and then managing that story projected onto other people. That's the first stage of leadership. The second stage of leadership is where we move from that into a space where we are like, what do I want? And other people, be damned, be darned, be darned, darn you, other people. I've had it with your tomfoolery. I'm going to charge what I want to charge. And so at this stage of leadership, our conversation becomes self-centered or self-focused. So I stop caring. In fact, I put in effort to not care about what you think. And it may not occur like effort. If you talk to people at this stage of leadership, they won't necessarily say, yeah, I'm putting a lot of effort into not caring what other people think. They'll just say, I don't care what other people think. I don't put effort into it. I just don't care. I stopped caring. It actually requires effort on your part to not care what other people think, because the human condition is to care what other people think. We are social creatures. We are empathetic creatures. Unless you were born a psychopath, lacking in empathy, without this part of your body that operates to have you feel empathetically what other people feel, you care. We care what other people think. And so in order to not care what other people think, we have to put energy ongoingly into that system to suppress this part of ourselves. So stage 2 might seem like almost nihilistic or like, I just don't care, but there's active energy being put into the system to deaden that part of you that cares about your impact, that cares about what other people think, that blah, 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 blah. And at this stage of leadership, the transition from here, from the first stage to the second stage, this will feel really empowering, because all of the stuff you previously felt unable, unwilling, incapable of doing now becomes available, because you're like, fuck them. You know, I used to not say fuck them because I was worried that people would think blah, 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 blah. Now I just say it and blah, 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 blah. If we look around us at the blogosphere, is there a blog? I don't think there's a blogosphere anymore, but the podcastosphere, the manosphere, which you could argue, I guess, maybe I'm a part of, not really, but like the mainstream sources of news and influencer culture and all of that, most of it is operating in this ontological level of leadership. You have people that don't really respond much to the feedback that's coming in. In fact, they've put effort into cultivating inside of themselves a way of being that is kind of immune to feedback. Fuck it, I just say what I'm going to say. And then that occurs to us a lot like courage. And there is a degree of courage to that. I want to be clear, in the sense, like relative to the first level of leadership. Relative to leadership where you're managing yourself constantly so as to not upset the apple cart, the second stage is quite courageous because you're willing for the apple cart to be upset. So that's stage 2, stage 2 of leadership. Jay here says, just sounds like a lot of care put into that not caring. Exactly. Yeah, it's ironic. And if you reflect this to people, like, wow, it seems like you're putting a lot of care into not caring about what people think, their head will explode. But the way it explodes is they double down on, nope, I just don't give a fuck at all. I just stop caring. It's like people that tell you, I stopped worrying about money, or I stopped worrying about fear. I just never feel afraid. Those people put a lot of energy and attention on fear because they've made it significant and something they have to, something wrong or bad or unhelpful. And as soon as we create something in our life that way, there's some significance that we have to manage ongoingly. So most of the world is operating at this stage of leadership, stage 2 leadership. This is the sort of leadership that is really quite reliable to create results from sort of a bulldozing point of view, you know, my way or the highway. And down this style of leadership, the most forceful personalities are the ones that kind of win the game of leadership, right? So the more I can not care about you, cast out as a wide net into the entire world, the more I can just insist on my point, and the more I can kind of argue over top of you, the better. And we'll touch on Charlie Kirk in a bit, but for this moment, he did a lot of debating, and one of the rational thinkers I listened to was talking about how debating is not about seeking the truth. That's not what debate is about. Debate is about sort of pulling people on the fence over to your side. It's about converting people over to your side, and that is about kind of, you could think of it more like proving you're right. So stage 2 leadership is often best served, this kind of debate is often best conducted from a stage 2 leadership place. You utterly believe in what you believe in. You completely are closed book. You're not open at all to any conversation outside of it. This is the right way, and I am going to forcefully put this into the world. Try as hard as you can. You can't convince me otherwise. There's no opening, blah, blah, blah. So this stage of leadership, it's very hard for us to have an impact on the leader, because the leader has actively cultivated inside of themselves an inability to be impacted. They don't care, right? So these are the sort of leaders where it's great if we're aligned with what they're creating. But if we have a desire for something different, I shouldn't say if we're aligned, I should say while we're aligned with what they're creating. So it's all fine and good while we're on board with what they're making happen. But then when they start to take a path that's not aligned with ours, and we say, hey, hold on, can you actually come back and listen to me, and I want to share? There's no way that lands. I'm not saying the leader has to change and listen to us and then do what we tell them to do. I'm saying even our expressed desire for them to consider our space, that doesn't happen because they've put so much energy into this second stage and maintaining it. Okay, so we got stage 1. I'm managing the world around me so I don't upset it. Stage 2, fuck the world around me. I don't care if I upset it. I care about Adam. And that becomes my primary driver, is what do I want? What do I need? Me. It's very me-centric. And I want to be very clear that it would be easy now to vilify stage 2. In fact, some of you listening might be thinking, yeah, you know what? These people do not care at all, and they do suck, and this is their problem. This isn't a problem. This isn't a wrong or a bad. This is just the phases that we move through as leaders ontologically as we deepen into our work. And you can't move from one stage to the other without, this is a continuum we move along. So there's no dodging this. You have to be here. Each one of us has to be able to land in this place before we can go to what's next. At stage 2, it doesn't mean you can't be considerate or helpful or even try to do things that benefit the greater good or anything along those lines. It just means that your scope of considerate, your ability to hold space to consider for stuff, tends to be narrowed primarily to focus on yourself. So the way that might look is you might be sitting in a room, you might be kind of supporting other people, like you're there to support the leaders of a space, and you notice something happening in the space. Here, I'll give an example from my own life, actually. I was, in the early days of my work, I was leading, I was doing coaching for the leadership team of our local TEDx team. So we had a team of people, the management team, putting on our local TED chapter, the talks, all that stuff. Boy, remember TED? It feels like it's millennia ago. And I was coaching the leadership. I'd enrolled them in the idea of having me as their coach so that, hey, you've got free coaching, why don't we embark on it, blah, blah, blah. And my friend was leading a meeting, and I noticed that the group the energy had kind of fallen down. And I interrupted my friend to say, hey, do you notice that the energy in the room had fallen down? And where I was looking, I could see, oh, there's something shifting in this group, but my dynamic where I was looking was primarily, what is there for me to do? What do I need to do in this situation, given that the energy of the group has dimmed. I was not really considering things like what might be the impact on my friend who's leading in this moment if I speak into it this way? What might be the impact in the room if I speak into it this way? My attention was primarily on what do I need to do? And so that's kind of how this stage of leadership operates. It's like, what do I need to do? Given I can see X, Y, and Z, what is there for me to take on? It's very me focused. Stage 3 of leadership. Then we're going to move off of this and talk about Ozempic. That's right, Ozempic. So stage 3 is where we are able to broaden our scope of leadership and our perspective, and the guiding force, like the driver for our leadership, is what will best serve what I'm committed to, or the space, or the greater conversation. So at this stage of leadership, we rise up and out of simply being focused on ourselves. The conversation stops being like, I used to censor myself all the time, and I am unwilling to censor myself ever again. And instead, we start to rise into a conversation where we're like, the thing that I'm committed to supporting on this team I'm on is that our leaders better themselves. And in service of that, would it actually serve me in this moment to speak the thing into the space? Or would it be better that I just hold on to that for now? Is me sharing what I see to share the best thing to serve this moment, this space, and what we are committed to as a leadership team? And the challenging thing about that conversation is, for someone who's just moved up to step 2 from step 1, this will often feel like a step backwards. You know, if you imagine there's a X and a Y axis that we're moving along, from stage 1 to stage 2, you move from left to right along the X axis and you kind of move up the Y. But then from stage 2 to stage 3, if you collapse this all down, it looks like you're going backwards, you're backtracking. I finally just got over censoring myself, and now I'm doing it again. That's fucked. Adam doesn't know anything about leadership. Podcast over. But instead, what's happening is you're now able to see that the rule about never censoring yourself actually isn't always going to be what serves the moment, what serves the greater good that you're committed to. So at stage 3, the irony at stage 2 is that there's a lot of ego involved, because we think of it like, I stopped caring about what other people think, so I've overcome the ego. It's actually entirely ego driven. Our ego has us sort of like, you know, it's all focused on ourselves. And to move from stage 2 to stage 3, a couple things have to happen. We have to start to be willing to let the world impact us again. We have to be willing to hear about how the way we're showing up is landing with other people, because that's the only way we can find out, is what I'm bringing into the space actually serving what we're committed to for the space. This doesn't mean that anytime someone gets upset, you scurry away and like apologize and tuck your leadership back into the precious chest that you keep it in. It just means that there's going to be times where, despite our best intentions, the impact we have is going to be that it leaves people shut down. I will provide an example, and it will be from my own life. So there was a period where what was happening was I was really practicing basically this transition from stage 1 to stage 2, where most of my life through my teens, 20s, and starting into my early 30s, I'd gotten really good at keeping myself very locked away. And then I would ask questions to avoid talking about myself. And it would get you talking, and then you would be in the space in the conversation. Then we could have a conversation, but there wasn't much of Adam in the space. Not a lot of vulnerability, not a lot of intimacy. Hopefully you were willing to share, because otherwise I'd awkwardly end the conversation and find someone else I could talk to. And so I was doing work with like really profound teachers and leaders and coaches, and starting to see this and recognize, wow, this is creating a pretty empty life for me. One that doesn't have a lot of connection or intimacy. I don't want that. So I was practicing what we'd call at stage 2, blurting. Now I was practicing just blurt intimacy into space. Just start getting it out there. And so I would be sharing in any space, anything about me. I'm bored right now. You and I would be having a conversation. I'd be like, I'm bored. Yell it into your face. Or I'd be talking with my friends and I'd just share like something from my life. Here's what's going on with me in my life, blah, 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 blah. And so for a while, that was just happening. You know, I was blurting and I wasn't really very open to any impact coming back. How was my blurting landing on people? Because I was like, I'm blurting, deal with it. You know, I'm practicing something new. And then I got some feedback from my friends that was like, you know, you're kind of, we don't want to shut you down, but you're kind of taking over the space. You know, they're like, and some of this stuff, you know, while we're fine and happy to talk to you about it, it's not really appropriate to the medium you're sharing it in. And I got fucking pissed at them. I got really upset at them for shutting down my expression. And I created all of this significant meaning about it. Like, they're just not up for the kind of intimacy that I want. And they're just not blah, blah, blah. That's all a very stage 2 based conversation. I'm putting myself into the space and you can't handle me. And therefore I need to eradicate you and find people that can handle me, which is just the flip side of that. You know, previous, the lack of connection came because I never shared anything about me. Now the lack of connection was going to come because all I did was share about me and I didn't listen to your opinion or your thoughts or anything about that. And so, 5 viewers, we're crushing it, guys. Put your name in the comment. Let me give you a shout out. 5 viewers. Boom. We've gone viral. I got all that feedback from my friends. I made them all wrong for it. And then I brought it to my coach and she helped me take a look at this and soften and release some of the anger and the righteousness I'd created and come down off my high horse and start to really plug into like, well, what's being brought here? And what I could see was I was starting to move, transition from stage 2 to stage 3. The conversation I started to engage with was like, what is it that my friends and I are actually committed to? Is it just that each of us blurt our shit into the space? Or is there a different sort of thing we want to cultivate with each other? And does me blurting this way, sharing no matter what, does that actually serve what we are committed to creating? Does that actually serve the greater conversation, aside from just, hey, I'm putting myself out there? And that's an edgy conversation to move into because it requires being willing to get that feedback. And that feedback at first will often feel like it's shutting you down. If we've done all of this work to get over the fear that people don't want to hear what we have to say, and then we get feedback that's kind of like, didn't love exactly what you did there, we're going to relate to it through that stage we just left rather than through the stage that is yet to come. And the way we transition is we start to receive that feedback and move into that. And that actually is what creates transformational leadership, because then the leader becomes this person that can stand in what there is for them to do, but can also let the world impact them, can receive people's feedback and take it into consideration, not collapse in on it like you do at stage 1, and not shove it to the side and bulldoze over it like we do in stage 2, but actually receive it, integrate it, bring it in, and then allow that to be part of their consideration as they then choose the path to be followed by them in integrity with the greater commitment that they are. That's the 3 stages of leadership. So we don't see a lot of stage 3 leadership in the world. Certainly not in people in like politics, very little of it. And not so much in like most of our media. Most of our media is kind of stuck in stage 2. That's where it operates from. Okay, so that gives you the stages of leadership. It's been a while since I've distinguished those. Felt like it might be important. What'd you write here, Jay? Jay says, seems like another space where it would be easy to have a spectrum exist too, showing up at each level in unique times and experiences, potentially influenced by past experiences or well-being state. I'm not sure. What's the space you're talking about, Jay? You say this all seems like another space where it would be easy to have a spectrum exist too. I'm not sure I follow the spectrum you're referring to, yeah, fill me in, enlighten me, make me one of the enlightened. Okay, let's see here. Where's my link? Okay, no comments on LinkedIn. Outrageous. Cool. Well, let's talk about Ozempic. Ozempic is, what do they call these? GL2, PGL2, GL3. There's some name for these types of drugs, which to some people are a godsend. The idea being that you've never been able to manage how you eat or your cravings or just have a relationship with food that was empowered. And finally, there's this drug that allows us to, that allows you, us, you, whatever. I thought my microphone was playing tricks on us. Allows us to quell the cravings that we have. So as far as I can tell, the primary ontological means by which Ozempic and other drugs along these lines operate is they shut down, they deaden the reward pathway. So ultimately, the way we work is that we feel a degree of reward when we go towards something that we have evolutionarily been built to be rewarded by. So sugar, strong reward pathway. Cocaine, all of these drugs like opioids, they ping that reward center in our brain really powerfully. But also, like, for each of us, like sex hits that reward center, pow. Winning something, et cetera, et cetera. And so the first thing is that the fantasy, or I think the like real hope with a drug like Ozempic is that there is something deficient in me. And if that deficiency could just be addressed, then I could live a normal life. This belief that the thing we're calling a deficiency, your inability to, like, your struggle with food, or your struggle with chasing sex, or your addiction, or your whatever, there's something wrong with the fact that that's there. It shouldn't be there, but it is. And if you could just overcome that, then you could be happy. And then you have a drug like Ozempic, which kind of severs the pathway between food and reward, alcohol and reward, sex and reward, whatever it happens to be. And then you can, then you can live your normal life. Then you could live the perfect life. And I want to be super clear. I am not at all immune to this whatsoever. I am a man with a lot of passion in my essence. I bring a lot of passion. And as far as I've noticed in my 15 years of this work, people with a lot of passion, we tend towards compulsion and often to addiction from our fear. We don't like stuff, we love it. And so my relationship with alcohol is always kind of in flux and is not always the most empowered. I'm drinking very little right now, in part because I know that it's very easy for me to fall down like a pathway of just abusing that. And you can put in anything you want in here, and there's like a part of me that reaches for it. Food, sugar, sex, video games, I can create an addict out of pretty much anything. So when I talk about like this thing that's wrong, I am not speaking from a pedestal where like I have solved this or I'm above this and I can look down at you idiots and point it out. I'm speaking from a place of I can really empathize with this, because that desire for it to be a deficiency that could just be solved lives within me. I can feel that. This is also sort of like, well, let's take a moment here and pause, because before we even talk about Ozempic or anything else, I want to look at that relationship to the addiction as being really important. My relationship to the way I am with alcohol, the way I am with food, the way you are with sex, the way you are with tobacco, whatever, that is really important. And that's the part we don't tend to distinguish. So for most people, their relationship with food, insert whatever you want in this blank, but we'll use food here, is that the way I am about food is bad. That's the relationship. Or the way I am about food is I just have no control. That's their relationship to it. That's their story about the way it goes. And, if we were to look at anxiety, right, the story would often be like, I'm just this way. This is just the way I am. I can't turn my brain off. And therefore, I need something external to me to solve it. This is, in ontological work, we call this a context. It's your story. It's the frame of reference with which you hold what is happening. And our context, our frame of reference, is all important and all powerful. It determines everything. Like, for example, if you wake up and you're exhausted and you had a bad night's sleep, the the context, the frame of reference within which you hold I got a bad night's sleep will determine everything. If you have a story like I got a bad night's sleep because I drank coffee and stayed up late at night, then next night you're probably going to turn towards not drinking coffee and maybe going to bed earlier to solve this. But if you believe that it's a problem due to a lack of vitamins that you're taking, then you probably aren't going to stop drinking coffee and you probably aren't going to stop blah, 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 blah. So our context is all empowering. It makes or breaks how things go. And often when we have a context that there's something deficient with us, we just can't change it. It's just the way we are. Then of course we go looking for solutions outside of us. And we also, because we relate to it as a deficiency, the solutions we expect are going to be as simple as like, well, flip it, just turn off the deficiency. Bob's your uncle. I'm back to normal. I'm doing good. I'm crushing it. And that's not how this stuff works. The context. So as a result, with anxiety, you end up with people who have a lot of anxiety. And one of the ways I see it often goes is they take anti-anxiety medication, which shuts off their brain, it deadens the pathway between them caring about stuff. It shuts off the part of them that has them alive to their fear. And when that pathway shuts off, there's less managing for it that they find they have to do. You don't actually address any of the underlying patterning that had that system get created in the first place. Why would you? You relate to that whole strategy just as something like a problem to be solved. Just like with Ozempic, we don't look at like, there's no ontological discussion, conversation, or exploration. It's just like, it's a problem. There's a bad thing here, and therefore I need to shut this part of me off. And the research on Ozempic is really quite clear on one thing in particular, which is when people come off of that drug, the weight comes back with a vengeance. And how couldn't it? Because what's happening is that the underlying pattern, the underlying system at play is not being addressed whatsoever. It's like the program is still running. You just turn the TV off for a period of time. And once you turn the TV back on, there's the same program running the exact same way it was. So you have a couple options, right? If the issue is that you have not built much of a muscle in terms of being with the way your reward center and how you are about gratification, all that, if you haven't built much of a muscle for that, one option is to create distance or block the pathway from, the behavior that gives you the reward and you're seeking of that reward. You put a barrier in front of that. That's kind of what Ozempic does. What that does is it takes away the need for you to do any work on the underlying pattern, because all you've done is you've created friction between you doing the thing and getting the reward, or shutting down the ability to reward yourself. And you've done that artificially by altering your biochemical makeup, your biology effectively. Alternatively, what is available down the ontological path is to address the relationship between these two, to start to build this muscle in working with your need to seek out validation, reward, whatever. And it also provides, when we look at something ontologically, we look at what is it that getting that reward provides you? What might have you seeking a reward so much in this situation? Do you seek out that sort of reward in all situations, or only when these sort of circumstances are alive? So when we look down this path, we're looking at the whole behavior and getting curious, like, why is this here? And more importantly, what benefit does this system serve? Because we assert down this lens, this ontological perspective, it's basically holistic, which is to say, your need to feed, just like my need to clean my glasses, it serves some kind of positive purpose. It allows you to cope with some experience that's uncomfortable. It allows you to deal with something in a way that previously you just don't, your system gets overwhelmed. You don't have the capacity to stick with. That's what's available when we start to look at things ontologically. When we medicate ourselves, that gets completely wiped off the table. There's no opportunity to look at any of this stuff because you're removing the coping strategy and then, off you go. Some people, just to be clear, aren't interested in looking down that lens. It's work. It's work to do that kind of healing, and it's work to take things on from that that lens. And so it's a lot. And so this isn't to make people wrong for the desire. Hold on, Mike's gone crazy. Come on, there we go. This isn't to make people wrong for that. It's simply to distinguish the two approaches so you can be clear on what you're going to get down each approach. When you take a drug like Ozempic or like Ambien or whatever the thing happens to be for you, you're going to get relief. You're going to get immediate relief because the pattern's being disrupted, but the underlying reason that that pattern is created in the first place doesn't. And so what happens when we address a problem at the surface like this, as opposed to ontologically, is that we are kind of removing the coping part of the mechanism, but the underlying thing for which you need to cope has not been addressed. And so this is why people will often, like you'll see someone stop drinking and then they get really into lottery, or they stop gambling and then they become really into whatever the other thing is. So it's because we've addressed the symptom on the top that was being used to cope with something, but we haven't addressed the thing underneath. And it's addressing the thing underneath that really leads to our healing. All of this is with a caveat, and the caveat is sometimes we need to be stabilized. If someone is deeply depressed and is ideating suicidal thoughts, they should probably they should get some support, and then probably that support should probably include some short to medium term medication to kind of help them regulate and soothe out their levels and get to a baseline that's manageable and functional. But once there, that's not sort of, I think what happens in our society because of our context in which we hold all this stuff. Once you get to that baseline, it's like, aha, I've solved the problem. I am good. I can live a normal life. The work is done. And in fact, the work starts from here. Now you're at a baseline. Now you can begin the work. Instead, it goes the other way. So for something like Ozempic, right, the work could begin once you've sort of severed that coping strategy, the chasing of rewards and tweaking that part of your brain has come off. But the trouble is we no longer feel the pain, right? Oh, I'm slim now. I've lost all that weight. Why would I bother doing work now? I just need to get my next hit of Ozempic, and there we go. And then, shit. So that's the trouble, is that the very point at which the work could really begin, because of the benefit of these drugs that help us achieve our baseline, is the point where we no longer feel the pain that would otherwise motivate us to take on that work. And thus the cycle continues. Spicy meatball. That's the spicy meatball take on Ozempic. Hey, y'all want to talk about Charlie Kirk? I have a few things to say about Charlie Kirk. First of all, I didn't agree with his politics whatsoever. It shouldn't be a big surprise to anyone. Second, I think that the things that he said often were insightful and at times hateful. Third, I don't think anyone deserves to be murdered, period. Full stop. So those are like the baseline stuff. One of the things that I've noticed in the wake of Charlie Kirk's shooting is there's a lot of disbelief about how people are relating to him in the wake of his passing. So he was killed, and then there's been a million different reactions, right? A lot of people have lionized or pedestaled or sort of exalted him in his, like, posthumously after dying, put him up, wow, this person was doing God's work, blah, blah, blah. I could care less which side you fall on that, whether you think he was doing the devil's work or the angel's work or whatever. That doesn't really matter to me. But what I notice is that people are really kind of bent out of shape. Like, how could you hold him in this light, given the stuff he said about, for example, Black people or whatever? And I think this is problematic because our disbelief makes it hard to empathize. And when we can't empathize, we can't heal. We can't grow together. We can't come into relationship with each other. And we can't heal the part of ourselves that is over there that we are unwilling to empathize with. But Adam, I would never be the way these people are being. That's the sign of a blind spot. So let's break this down a little bit. Um, the how could people relate to Charlie Kirk this way? How could they see him like this? So one of the best sort of contexts, I guess, like ways of speaking about who Charlie Kirk has been for the right, I heard was from a really quite a clear-minded thinker I follow, and he said he's sort of in a lot of ways like the galvanizing figure that George Floyd was for the left. And so the immediate thing we typically want to do is argue about the differences, but I find it helpful to just consider, that's an interesting perspective. Like, it would probably be very easy to argue for why George Floyd should not have been exalted, or blah, 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 or blah, 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 or maybe, you know, whatever. But that's not really the point. The point is that this provided a person where they were murdered unjustly, and that there is a wrong about that, and then that galvanizes and creates a righteousness and a sort of like a an outrage, and a like one of ours was killed. So first of all, that I was like, that's a really interesting take, and that makes a lot of sense to me. The disbelief, the way this conversation tends to go is, I can't believe how people are holding this character given how he was being, or even regardless of how Charlie Kirk was being, I can't believe he was like how people are relating, holding him, etc. And what I notice, ontologically speaking, is that when people say that, what I'm actually hearing them say is, I am uninterested in understanding why people are holding Charlie Kirk this way. So the disbelief is not sort of like, I don't understand why they would hold him this way, and I really want to find out from them and learn and understand this. Instead, it's sort of like, I am unwilling to believe how they could possibly hold him this way, and then we entrench ourselves in that place. And all that does is it creates us and them. It separates us, and it makes it even harder to empathize and get on board. And so it's always easy to empathize with, it's always easy to put ourselves in someone else's shoes when the circumstances, the facts, the situation is one that's comfortable for us. That's not where empathy is. That's not where our work lies. Our work lies in places like this. Our work lies in these situations where we're absolutely like, fuck no, I am not willing to consider empathizing with the other side. Hell no. That's where the work is. It's just like, it's really easy to follow all of this leadership dogma that gets posted everywhere. Like, yeah, the leader always listens, and yeah, the leader considers all points of view, and yeah, and yeah, and yeah, until it's something for which you are incredibly justified for not doing that stuff. And that's where the moment lies for you. That's where the edge is. And so the opportunity presented by Charlie Kirk, if you're on one side, or George Floyd, if you're on the other side, or whoever the next person will be, or whatever, is to actually stop hanging out in the righteousness of your disbelief, and instead to start bringing some curiosity and really like exploring with people in relationship, like, well, tell me more, help me understand, help me get onto your side. And that's really tough, because there's a part of us that doesn't want to give that over. We don't want to release that. We don't want to let the other side be right. We want to hang on to our rightness and their wrongness. The reason you might do this is not for other people. It's because there is a schism that gets created. There's a schism between you and those other people. And that schism occurs entirely external, meaning I don't have this going on in myself. I just can't stand those people, and I therefore conduct myself this way. But the can't stand those people, however they're being, that part of them that you can't stand, you also have no capacity to be with that part of you. And when you have no capacity to be with some part of yourself, like some way of being inside of yourself, it gets suppressed below the level of your consciousness. And what it does then is it eats you for lunch. When we eliminate the ability to be conscious and responsible for a particular way of being, it comes out sideways. It comes out indirectly where we can't see it. And then what happens is we end up doing the stuff that we condemn others for, but by self-justifying it. Oh, it's different in this instance. Oh, yeah, I mean, I hate complainers and I know I'm complaining about them, but I mean, it's different because I'm complaining about the very thing. So that's not actually like me. Or yeah, I just don't have judgments of other people. I mean, but I think when people have judgments of other people, that's ridiculous. You know, we can't be responsible for it, even though we're actively doing the thing. And you end up becoming the very thing you despise and you can't see it. So, you know, whoever it is, it doesn't have to be Charlie Kirk. It can be, I don't know, some Powerpuff Girls or Pup Patrol or whatever it is that's triggering this for you. But these things are driving something up internally for us to take on. And that's the practice of leadership, is to look on our side rather than condemning the stuff out there. And he says, sipping tea. Let's take a sip too. And people will argue sometimes, they'll make the statement, well, I don't have the luxury of that sort of sanguine perspective that you're offering, Adam. That's a privileged position. I understand that it seems that way. This is one of those things like someone driving around, running from chore to chore, saying, I don't have the luxury to stop and fill my car up with gas. I don't have that time. That must be nice for you to have a full tank of gas, but I've got too much to do. You can insist on not having the luxury, and what that'll do is ensure that this kind of deeper ontological work for you exists and perpetuates itself as a luxury, as opposed to an essential for living a balanced, healthy, clean life. This isn't a luxury. This is, it's a first principle. It's a committed stand. And like every committed stand, it happens in the face of all of your circumstances telling you you don't have time for this. So it's fine if you choose to relate to it as like a luxury or something like that, but that will ensure that that's how it stays for you. And instead, my invitation would be to consider that this is actually, if we want to grow beyond this, the growth won't come from condemning the other side. That will just perpetuate the very thing that this whole conversation has been distinguishing. And we have to actually set that down, as much as it's tempting to pick up our arms and, you know, raise our pitchforks and torches and march into the night. Okay, boom. Soapbox complete on that one. Compassion versus condemnation. Very quickly, I just want to speak to this. One of the biggest things in the way of our compassion and empathy is that we have a belief that if I am compassionate and empathize with someone over there, it means that I will condone what they're doing. And therefore, I cannot bring compassion because I'm unwilling to condone what they're doing. And therefore, I'm righteous in my judgment. This is conflating those two things. Compassion is distinct and separate from condemnation. You can love your son. You can hold your son with compassion. You can empathize with the desires in your son that had them do the thing they did, whilst not condoning them doing it. You can hold them with compassion whilst reprimanding them, whilst putting out some punishment or some consequences for them. And if the doing remains the same, you punishing them, you setting consequences, whatever, but who you're being is compassionate versus righteously judgmental, it's going to create a radically different result for you and your son. The same thing exists for every single person that you are castigating with judgment. Every person on the other side of the political spectrum, every single leader that you judge, every single person in traffic or in front of you or behind you that you are hating on, you can have compassion for them whilst not necessarily condoning their actions. The hard part is to find our way to compassion. We first have to let go of this righteous insistence that what they did was wrong. In order to find our way to compassion, we typically start at wrong. What you did was wrong. I am right. Fuck you. Hooray me. And to move into this place where we can have both compassion whilst not condoning and actually create a new path, we have to first set down this idea that it's wrong. And we have to get really curious. in our hearts, but also sometimes explore with the person, like what led them to do that? If I held these people as pure and innocent in their intention, meaning not trying to be a dickhead, not my judgments of them like they're just doing it because they're selfish. If I held them the same way I held myself, what would have me do the thing that they did? And if we can explore that, then we can get to a place where we're like, well, of course they acted that way. Like, not, of course they acted that way because they have a tiny brain and were born eating wall plaster. Of course they acted that way because I would have acted that way in the same situation, given the same circumstances. And once we can get there, then we can come back to, now that I have them with compassion, what might there be to do, or how might there be to be, or what might there be to do from here? The trouble is we don't want to let go of this thing to start. We want to hold them. We want to keep our hand on their forehead, the hand of you did wrong, and then try to seek compassion for them from that place. And that doesn't work. So we have to let go of our righteousness in the moment to seek compassion and empathy. And once we've done that, we can come back over here and revisit it. We have very little experience doing this. We are terrible at doing this. And because we are terrible at it and have very little experience with it, my dog trying desperately to get in here, he's got a hot take on this. Because we have very little experience and because we're terrible at it, we then don't trust that if I let go of making you wrong, I will actually come back to a place where we can grow together. And so as a result, we hang on to this thing, we keep people wrong, and we conclude, it doesn't work, Adam. I tried that thing you did, but it didn't work. So I'm just going to keep doing this. And it's like, yeah, you half-heartedly tried, but not really. So that's compassion is our key here. Okay, let's talk about leading up and being stymied by your leaders. Here's how this sounds. I'm trying to lead up, but my leaders suck. This is what you say, you, whoever you are. I'm trying to lead up, but my leaders suck, and so it's not working. Then you're not leading up. You are doing your preferred version of leading up. So leading up is way less sexy than we want it to be, and it's much harder work, and it's much more humbling than we'd like it to be. We take on the notion of leading up from a place of arrogance, and it doesn't occur like arrogance, but it is. So the flavor of leading up that most people have is, my leaders are doing a terrible job, I'm going to give them feedback. My leaders aren't aware of this, I'm going to tell them about this. I'm going to point this out. The trouble is that all of our attention is on what we're going to do and what they're doing wrong. There's very little humility in it. It's sort of coming from the place of like, I can see something that they can't. I'm aware of something they're not. They're not willing to hear it, but they need to hear it. But all of that sort of stuff. The real work of leading up begins with taking on your own work, like modeling that all the way to the core. And what most attempts to leading up actually are that you got triggered by something, or you are actively being triggered by something. Like, I don't feel that people in the meeting are being given enough time, or people in the meeting are being given too much time, or these meetings are a waste of time, or whatever. And because it's human nature not really to be particularly curious about, like, we don't really examine our stuff very much. We might ruminate on it, but we don't really examine it ontologically. We don't really look at it through the lens of like leadership and ourselves. We jump over our own side of the conversation and we go straight to what the leader needs to hear. Here's the thing the leader's not doing. This is going wrong and you should change it. What we don't realize is that most of the feedback we seek to give when we quote unquote lead up is coming from a reactive place towards our own trigger, our own wound. So most people are triggered by something that happened. They're unaware that they're triggered. They're in denial that they're triggered. This applies to me and it applies to you because that's human nature. We get triggered and confronted and then we're like, I'm not triggered or confronted. I'll give you an example in just a sec. And then we offer feedback from a reaction to our trigger. So it goes sort of like this, like there's too many people in this meeting are like, there's a couple people in the meeting that are taking up too much space. Therefore, Adam, you need to lead this meeting differently and you need to cut people off more. There's no humility or inquiry or examination of your own story. Like, hey, what might be getting triggered for me here? Like, what might be my story about what's right in a meeting, or about people giving space or not enough space or too much space? You know, like, what might be getting driven to the surface for me? That is a humbling conversation, because the first step there is that you take the conversation about your leaders off the table completely, and you exclusively look through the lens of what is getting driven up for me? Like, what about this am I struggling to be with? You're really looking through the lens of, instead of what are my leaders doing wrong, you're like, if everything happening was perfect and there was no feedback I needed to be giving, and this experience I am is uncomfortable, what is the work for me to take on right here? The work for you to take on is almost never give the feedback. That's what we jump to. So notice that the first step of leading up is imagining, like, actually standing in the place there's nothing to give to your leaders. Just like the first step in finding compassion is letting go of the idea that what people did is something wrong. And this is the part of leading up we don't fucking like, because it makes us, you know, ironically, it actually gives us access to our power, but it makes us feel powerless at first, because we really want to shove that thing at the leaders. They need to hear this. I was the captain of a team in a sport, and one of the members of my team had gotten into it with another member of the team, and so my person, we'll call them Jimmy, had gotten into it with this other team. We'll call them Reggie and Regina. And so I wasn't really present to it. I was present at the initial part, and then this happened sort of out of my purview. But Reggie and Regina, the members on the other team, came to me and were like, you know, this is what happened, and here's why what this person did was wrong, and you need to, like, as a captain, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And what I noticed was that Reggie and Regina, these people on the other team, were amped up, like triggered, and were kind of coming to this conversation with me about what Jimmy, my team member, needed to do differently, what I needed to do to manage Jimmy differently, but there was zero ownership on their part about how they were showing up in the moment. There was no sort of like, hey, I want to acknowledge right now, I'm really triggered. And like, that's in my space too, because they didn't have the capacity. And I said something to Reggie. I said, yeah, you know, like, I can really get this. This would be this was triggering for everyone. Like, for me, I'm feeling a little bit dysregulated in this moment, and for Jimmy and for you. And the person sort of scoffed at my suggestion that he was triggered, whilst breathing about down to the level of their jaw and no further. So we're unaware of our trigger in the moment, because it would be incredibly inefficient to have awareness on that when we're triggered. Whilst I'm scared of the tiger, my attention isn't, like, my consciousness doesn't sort of expand and go, oh, okay, what's happening right now is I'm triggered by the fact that I'm scared of a tiger, and therefore my focus, none of that is on the plate. My focus gets narrowed to run away or throw the spear. End of. Are you triggered? Get out of here. That's not the conversation I'm in. And so in these situations leading up, the hard part is acknowledging, as a starting point, almost always, you're triggered, and you're trying to give someone feedback from your trigger. And anytime we give feedback from being triggered, what ends up happening is that a whole bunch of garbage comes through with the feedback. The energy of that feedback is jagged. It's filled with, like, here's why you as the leader are doing something wrong. Here's what you need to do differently. And it does nothing to address us and who we're being in it. So if you want a suggestion for how to lead up more powerfully, the starting point would be simply to acknowledge your trigger. And anytime you feel compelled to provide feedback, to really stop and take stock of what about, like, what in this feedback is mine. So for example, what can I own about my own stories? What can I own about how I show up? What can I own about how I'm relating to this or having this go? Or where is my leadership in this conversation? Leadership not meaning the thing to do, but like, where is your ontology getting messed up with? That's very, very challenging. That's a place to start practicing, but it's not the end of the game. That's the beginning. Okay. Leading up. All right. So, there's one other part I want to say on this. I am being stymied by my leaders. I would lead up, except my leaders. That's not a leadership conversation. That's a victim-based conversation. Remember, the leader, to take on transformational and ontological leadership, is to take off the table your ability to, you're relinquishing the right to blame other people or to even hold other people as the reason you can't. So if your leader came to me and said, oh, I would be leading except for Reggie, this stupid lunkhead, isn't open to my leadership, it's not my fault. You as Reggie would, or you're the lunkhead, I guess Reggie's the one calling you the lunkhead, you would be like, well, that guy sucks. I need Reggie to figure this out and show up as leader. It's not fair for him to put it on me. Agreed. Now, if you're practicing leading up, that means you're the one holding the ontology of leader, and you have to relinquish the right to put it on them as the fault, as their fault. I would lead up if my leaders were, That's not the question we engage with. The question we engage with is, given my leaders are this way, given my leaders show up this way, how is there for me to show up? Who is there for me to be? I don't feel like when I bring something to my leaders, they hear me. Great. So how do you need to shift or change so that you do feel like they hear you? What might your leaders require from you to have them hear you differently? These are annoying questions because it's much more comfortable to pass the buck up the chain. But that's not what leading up is about. Leading up is relinquishing hierarchy. It's relinquishing the righteousness of they should be further along than I am, and therefore it's on them. It's relinquishing all of that and simply embracing the question of who is there for me to be as leader in this moment. Oh, amazing spicy take. Spicy meatball there. All right, let's go to, where did my notes go? Okay, we've got some LinkedIn posts we're going to talk about. So here's one. I saw, it was a beautiful graphic, all leadership and good infographics. That's the way this stuff comes. This was a picture of a leader on a raft, and then it said, great leaders protect their team from, and then below the water was a bunch of different fish with teeth. I think maybe piranhas, possibly sharks. Said protect their team from, and then this list: lack of trust, micromanagement, toxic culture, gossip, office politics, burnout, no growth opportunities, low pay, unrealistic deadlines, unclear goals. Is that leadership? Does a good leader protect their team from? So, this is one of those situations where it comes to the question of third stage leadership versus first or second stage leadership. So from a first stage leadership perspective, I'm a leader. I'm committed to making sure your experience works a particular way. And so my conversation becomes, what do I need to protect you from? And all of these things from that lens of leadership would be excellent to protect you from. A lack of trust. Hell yeah, I'll protect you from that. Micromanagement, I'm going to stop the people above having conversations with you. Toxic culture, well, duh. Gossip, yep. Office politics, kind of, I mean, those three you could probably lump together, but whatever. Protect you from burnout. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to protect you from it somehow. I'll probably throw water on you. Low pay, okay. That's a big, tall order, but whatever. But you get the idea. That first stage, my job as a leader is to protect you from all of these things. My first question is, what about if protecting my team from burnout leads to me burning out? What about if, in order for my team to be paid well, it means that I, as the leader, have to take a pay cut? What about, et cetera, et cetera? So from first stage leadership, this becomes a rule. It becomes an always on, because my goal becomes to protect my team. But from third stage leadership, we start to explore things beyond dogma. This, as a rule, is dogma. Dogma is basically a set of rules to be followed every time. Here is the thing to do. We'll come into dogma versus spirituality in a bit, but as soon as it becomes the right answer or the right thing to do, the leader always eats last. That's now become dogmatic, meaning I do it every time. That's the rule. Great. until what is actually going to, like, the breakthrough required for my team, if we'll sit with the leader always eats last, that's great, until the breakthrough required for my team is that I model for them that sometimes we have to nourish ourselves first. If I model for them, hey, we're in a medical profession where, let's say, we're nurses, and burnout is rampant. And what my team needs to see is me say, actually, no, I can't help you right now. I need to get an hour of sleep. It's absolutely essential, because otherwise I'm going to do 20% of the quality of job that I can do, and everything else is going to suffer. I'm sorry. That's an example of me feeding myself first. As soon as I get into leadership dogma, that's not on offer, because the rule is the leader always eats last. And so these sort of dogmatic leadership approaches are what lead us to the problems that we have. It's ironic, because these sort of great leaders protect, or these leadership dogma things that get posted, ostensibly they solve one problem and then create the reciprocal to that problem. So you end up with leaders that never put themselves first. And then there's a swing out to the other side that's like a good leader. And then here's the new dogma. Great, I've got a rule. Oh, thank goodness. I'm desperate for a rule. That gets us now to the place where all we do is put ourselves first, and so on and so forth. So when we move from first stage leadership to third stage leadership, the conversation grows beyond great leaders protect, great leaders do this. Great leaders protect their team from, let's say, burnout. Well, kind of, except there's going to come a point where your team needs to learn about, like, there's a breakthrough involved that hold on, let me get the words. Let's assume that your team, ontologically, so the being of your team is that any sort of discomfort, let's say, like, they don't feel like they're performing enough, or there's like a flagging deadline, or they're nervous about not being valued by the team, any sort of discomfort, what they've learned to do is address it through performance, through working harder. Okay, so the idea that the leader needs to protect this team from burnout is actually going to have the leader get in the way of this team creating a breakthrough for themselves. The breakthrough would be that the team actually leans forward and creates that very burnout. And only by getting there and then discovering, like bankrupting it, can they create what's next. And so at this point, the leader starts, if they're dogmatically following, I'm protecting my team from burnout, you are not allowed to work more than 40 hours, the end. And I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to kick you off your computer if you're answering emails too soon. And I'm going to slap the phone out of your hand so that it hits your patient in the head. I'm a powerful leader. That's great, until that protection becomes the thing blocking them from creating the breakthrough. And so we have to be really careful about this. And leadership is rarely, if ever, about protecting your team. Good management has a lot of protection. Good manager's job is not to support a team to create the next breakthrough. It's to protect them. It's to help the team optimize within the bounds that they are already reliable to create. So a good manager is the sort of person you bring in when you just want to optimize. You want to have your team do the best job they can within the boundaries and the ontology that is already available to them. A good leader's job is to support that team to grow beyond something. And the growth beyond something requires leaning into the bankrupt old ways of being. Think of it like this. Like, imagine if we had, if we replaced leaders with great physical trainers, and then we wrote, great physical trainers protect their team from, like pushing their muscles beyond their capacity. And, you can fill in the blanks. That's what you have to do. In order to grow and develop, your muscles have to kind of get pushed past their current capacity. And anytime a leader is trying to protect their team, it's a recipe for that leader to burn out. And it's also a recipe for stepping over, supporting that team outside of their existing capacity. Okay, I got two last things we're going to touch on, and then we're going to wind down. So one is, someone wrote this post. What is the one thing you optimize for? What's at the root of every decision you make? And this person says, I optimize for energy. And then they put a little swirly line, like, that's energy. I evaluate every decision based on whether it will energize me or drain me. I'm always optimizing for emotional, physical, mental, spiritual load, movement, sleep, eating, blah, blah, blah. Energy leads to presence, and that's where my power comes from. Last night, I was named Floater of the Month. Ugh. Ugh. At my True Rest Float Spa, ugh, which is one of the places I still find stillness, blah, blah, blah. You can now call me the big homie floater. I will not do that. What is the one thing you optimize for that makes everything else in your life work? I don't have anything wrong with what this person wrote. Great. Optimize for energy. For me, it's full expression. It's full expression. And I suppose probably also like opening the moment. So I'm always looking like, what part is there for me to open up further? And it's going to open the moment. How can I create more and more art with the moment? And so, you know, if the moment is Donald Trump deporting immigrants, how can I create art? How can I meet that moment with art? For me, art is, I can create more powerful, better, beautiful art than if I just go online and raise a pitchfork and condemn. Or if the moment is like a bunch of dirt gets dumped on my driveway, how do I create art with that? What can I create that would be artful? This is not, I'm not suggesting I'm good at this. I'm not suggesting that this is something I've resolved or have handled or that I'm like a master of, or you should be like me. I struggle with it all the time. It's not to suggest that this isn't like the thing I do that I'm now selling other people. It's more just that's the stand I take for myself. And I try my best to remember my stand. And I would say 85% of the time I completely forget it. And I'm like, fuck this. And I get annoyed about it. But the other 15% of the time, it provides a moment for me to pause and take stock and ask myself that question and perhaps create something different. Okay. Final round. Last thing I want to talk about is something a teacher of mine often shares, which is this idea that self-improvement, as you move through this work, slowly over time shift to self-acceptance. So self-improvement, tea time. The notion of most people's approaches to self-improvement is about fixing what they subtly deem is wrong about themselves. This is most prevalent in like the beauty industry, you know, like cosmetic surgery, because cosmetic surgery, I'm not talking about like you're a burn victim and they're doing something there. I'm talking to like putting fillers in your lips or Botox or whatever. It's nice because that provides a physical analog for what we are talking about on a more energetic or ontological level. And the beauty industry is ostensibly about loving yourself, but what's really happening is you're sort of buying into the belief or the story that you're loving yourself over top of hating yourself. There is some part of yourself that you cannot accept. You cannot just love and allow as is, and therefore change it. And so the thing about, I should say the majority, because it is totally possible to be like, I love the way I look and I'm completely content with it. And I want to put Botox in my face. That is possible, but by and large, that's not what we see. And what we see, you'll see people with plastic surgery. And if you really get present to them, what I am left often feeling is a lack of love internally. I rarely see these people and feel like a deep experience of delight and joy and like wonder and, you know, grace for themselves. More often I feel like a rigidity with which they hold themselves, a fragility and a rigidity and like, you know, a lot of these people might talk about loving themselves a lot, but that's not the experience of who they're being with themselves. It's, excuse me, more like they're talking about how much they love themselves because of how much they hate themselves. The more someone internally hates themselves, the more they will often swing out to like a lot of conversation about loving themselves. So that's the beauty industry taken down, boom, in one statement. And a lot of the transformational self-help, personal growth, a lot of that industry is done from the exact same place. So people are like, I'm lazy. Let's work with a coach to change that. And that is efforts taken to overcome a part of yourself you've deemed unworthy, unacceptable, worthy of hate, whatever it happens to be. Even if these words are a bit too strong for you, there's some flavor of there's something wrong with me. Like it shouldn't be this way. And so our attempts to grow are done almost like metaphorically the barrel of a gun. They're done from a place of it's wrong. Sort of like imagine if you had a little boy or you were a little girl or some combination thereof, or perhaps you're a non-gendered individual, I don't care, whatever. And you're trying to learn a bike, or your child is trying to learn to ride a bike, and the story they have is not being able to ride a bike is wrong. They're going to have a way harder time riding that bike. And even if it takes the exact same amount of time, they're going to be miserable. Because every time they fall off the bike, they're going to be like, you piece of shit, you suck, you're horrible, you're garbage. How could you not do this? You should already be able to do this. That is not going to beget a loving experience. That's going to beget a harsh experience. And whilst they might achieve the result of learning how to ride a bike, they've done so from a place of despising themselves. Contrasted with someone that learns to ride the bike like purely from an exploration of how does this go and what is there for me to discover, blah, 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 blah. So who we're being underneath the actions we take on creates a radically different experience of life. And when we get deeper into this transformational work, what we start to find is that just like our attempts to lead up, just like our attempts to correct the wrong we see over there in the world, just like our attempts to give feedback to people that they really need to hear because they had this impact and I got to tell them, all of it's coming from an internal space of whatever happened is wrong. That whatever happened is wrong story is undistinguished, and then we're trying to give feedback from that place, or we're trying to improve ourselves from that place. And so really transformational work often slows you way down. And at first it's very frustrating because it doesn't look like the Tony Robbins rah empowerment. It doesn't look like the coach who's like, you're going to listen to what I say and I'm going to set you straight and we're going to get you there and your neck could be as thick as my neck if only you get up at 4 a.m. and blah, 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 blah. It doesn't look like any of that. Often it at first feels very almost weak because especially the more driven you are to create results, the softer it'll feel because at first you got to learn to come to terms with that self-loathing that's at play. And you got to learn how to like actually come to peace with where you are in your life. And if we can start from that place where we can get to the point where we're like, I can actually love myself exactly as I am. I actually don't require I change. Then any effort we take to change from that place will be incredibly more potent. It's going to be more potent in terms of the results it creates, but it's also going to be much more impotent in terms of, sorry, not impotent, much more potent in terms of our experience as we do so. And so one of my teachers would often say that as you deepen in this work, you find that self-improvement often morphs into self-acceptance. We want to learn to allow ourselves to be where we are because then stuff can start to shift naturally. And this ties in with this Zen saying you will often hear me quote, which is you can't leave a place until you've been there. So a lot of people come into like one of the places I see this the most is meditation, and people meditate so that they can get like past their feelings of anger or of anxiety or of sadness. That's missing the point of meditation entirely. What meditation does is it has you go quiet and then you got to be with those feelings. And we kind of have to surrender to them. And so often, if you're meditating properly, if you're doing it right, I'm intentionally using these terms. I recognize the silliness of those terms, but if you're doing it as intended, what happens at first is you get angrier, you get sadder, you get more present to the fullness of the feelings that you have been avoiding all of your life. And along with that showing up, so too shows up all of the strategies you've been using to try to quell them. So often when people sit in practice in meditation, first what happens will be a lot of fear because they're now going quiet and they can be present to it. And then a lot of anxiety shows up because the anxiety is the coping strategy for the fear. And if you're willing to sit in that stillness for long enough, slowly over time, you kind of bankrupt the anxiety as strategy and it sort of falls away. And then you just have to sit with your fear. And then over time, you discover like, it's sort of like you end up in this waiting game with your fear, where your fear is like, you're going to fail. And you're like, you shrug your shoulders and you're like, yeah, all right. What else? And then your fear is like, your wife's going to leave you. And you're like, your anxiety comes up and then that falls away. And then you just sort of sit with it and feel afraid. And then you're kind of like, okay, all right. And over time, eventually your fear sort of gets bored. It's like, this is dumb. This guy's not doing anything. And it bounces because it's no longer able to move you. So in that comes self-acceptance. Yeah, I'm afraid. And yeah, I don't like the feeling. And yeah, I want to move away from it. And yeah, I want to think about it. And can I just allow all of that to exist exactly as it is? And once that happens, a lot of this stuff falls away. Then you can have peace, and then you can act from that place. And that's a much more powerful place to act from. Okay, it's plugs time. Preceded by tea. There are a few things that I want to plug for you. We are going to go in order of commitment, I suppose. The smallest commitment is starting January. We have a creating clients course kicking off. Very low cost course, $1,000. In this course, what we train you in is the art of enrollment and creating sales, creating business, creating the opportunity to serve the world and get paid for it as a quality of your being and your relationship. So in this course, we're not giving you sales tactics. We're providing you stuff to do, but we're creating a context in which you can hold everything you're up to. And if you're the sort of person that's like, I hate sales, or if you find yourself saying stuff like, I love the active coaching, I hate the business of it. Or if you find yourself like a leader who's like, why don't people just do what I tell them to do? This course is for you. We teach you how to help people see possibility in their own lives. And then with your support, take action into it. And that is not really a sales conversation. That is an enrollment and a possibility conversation. And that is something that leaders, coaches, and anyone engaged in any kind of profession where you're helping people take a step into the unknown benefit from having. So creating clients course, let me put that in the chat. I wonder if this will post like this. No, that's the wrong one. Yes, there we go. So you can learn more about that if you go to evergrowthcoaching.com/creating-clients-course. And I'm pretty sure if you go to our webpage there, you can find a link to it. But anyhow, that's evergrowthcoaching.com/creating-clients-course. Second opportunity is we've got, I think, 5 seats remaining for our Costa Rica trip. And so this goes from January 25th to the 31st. You get to hang out in the rainforest of Costa Rica. We're staying at a place called La Fortuna. It's a ecotourism hub. We rent out an entire eco lodge. It's an amazing experience. It's truly life-changing. We do deep transformational work during most of those days. We also take excursions. I teach a dance class. There's yoga in the morning. There's delicious, wholesome food. You get to experience the Costa Rica Pura Vida lifestyle. Sometimes we go see sloths. Sometimes we go see, we go do whitewater rafting or zip lining, or who knows what it'll be. And you get to meet people of your tribe. So if you enjoy this kind of content, and if you're like, man, I want to dip in, I just don't feel up for like a year-long commitment or something like that. This is an amazing way to do it. And this conversation exists. The best way to have this conversation continue to touch you in your life is to stay engaged in it. And so by all means, come here, but also when you come to the retreat, you're going to get to meet a whole bunch of other people that are engaged in the same conversation in their own lives. And it really creates an all boats rise. So definitely recommend you come join us for that. It's $4,000 and that covers everything but your flight. So your shuttle to and from the airport, your accommodations, your food, the excursions we do, that's all covered. You can learn more about that by going to evergrowthcoaching.com/the-retreat. It's going to be incredible. Can't wait. And then lastly, we've got our next intensive comes up at the end of May. So that's May 26th through 29th is when we'll be running that event here in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia. And you can learn more about that. I think if you just go to my website and click on work with me, there's a link to it. But you can track that down at evergrowthcoaching.com/the-intensive. Also a gooder. I'm putting all these links, but it looks like they're only showing in YouTube. So you can go to YouTube and search this out. I'll try to make a point of posting them on LinkedIn and Facebook under the comments as well. So you've got them. Each of these opportunities is a way to really shift the dynamic of your leadership and your lives, and to really take this stuff we're talking about out of the realm of an interesting conversation and weave it into the fabric of your life, such that it's not something you have to try to remember how to practice. It's like going away and learning how to ride a bike. You never have to try to figure out, what did I learn that time? You just now know how to ride a bike. And so that's what we create in these experiences, experiential shift in how you be in the world. And that has ripples everywhere. Okay. Wow. 11:30. I absolutely nailed my punctuality today. I always love to hear feedback. If you like the show, please send me a message. Let me know. If you would like to be live coached on this show, please let me know. I'm looking for people that want to be coached right now. I'm not looking for guests that want to come and share about their book or the inspiring stories of their lives. I already have tons and tons and tons of those offers. And if there's a topic you have that you'd like to hear me talk about, or that you think would be a good question to explore, something like that, please let me know. That always makes for a really juicy conversation. Have an amazing weekend, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.